Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. We're glad you're here, and welcome to Astral Meadow. And I don't know if the guest, if you remember Astral, but she was our guest in June or July, I believe, and we had a great conversation. And but I'm going to. She's done. She's learned a lot since then, and
Yeah.
and we're going to talk about a different subject than we did then. And you'll have to bear with me here. I forgot to pull up the bio on my Word doc here to read. And there we are. So Astral Meadow is a dynamic and multifaceted practitioner and host of the Astral Hour podcast. Astral's work delves deeply into metaphysical, esoteric, and healing realms, offering insights and practices that resonate with seekers from all walks of life. In addition to her role as a podcast host, Astral is a practicing homeopath as well as a skilled astrologer providing natal chart readings, a reader of the Akashic Records, and a talented tarot and oracle card interpreter. Her artistry shines through her work in painting, watercolor, embroidery, and wood burning, reflecting her soulful connection to the creative process. On her podcast, The Astral Hour, Astral explores a diverse array of topics, including yoga, archetypes, reiki, art therapy, acupuncture, astral projection, shadow work, plant medicine, and astrology. And she had one on biofield tuning.
Yes, I
Um,
did.
and through engaging conversations with insightful guests, she creates a space for learning, laughter, and connection. And I'm sure you'll enjoy checking out her website and her podcast. The links are below.
Thank
And
you.
awesome. Yes, awesome. Astral, thanks so much for joining us again today. And
Yeah.
it's also a special podcast because it's Ramey's, well, it might be not, she might return as a guest, but it's her last time as a podcast host. And a couple weeks ago was Jessica's last time as a podcast host. And I'll be trying my hand at going solo starting December
Oh.
31st. And
Oh.
so I'm excited about that. And I really, really appreciate having Ramey and Jessica as part of the podcast to help me for a year to get used to talking more. And it's been fun to connect with my friends every week.
Yeah, it has
So,
been fun. Very, very interesting people and fun topics, and yeah,
yeah.
you'll do so good.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm excited about it.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah,
good next step to take.
yeah.
And so we'll get started on with Astral here. And this was one of my big questions as soon as, well, even in the summer, it started turning around in my head, but I didn't take time to look up the answer myself because I just didn't. But the question was going on, well, what really is homeopathy and how does it differ from naturopathic? Um, na- Naturopathology. I don't know how you even say it.
Naturopathy.
Thank you, thank you. I have another dear friend, a biofield tuner who is currently on her first year of naturopathy school, and so
Hmm.
I was trying to figure out, well, what's the difference between all these, and I don't know. So please tell us.
Okay, so I'll start with just diving into homeopathy and what it is and the founder of homeopathy, and then I'll cross compare it to naturopathy because they are very similar. It's just
Okay.
their approach that's slightly different. So, homeopathy is a natural system of therapeutics developed at the end of the 17th century by Dr. Samuel Hahnemann. It works through supporting the vital force, which it does by using highly diluted substances of remedies made from plants, minerals, and other substances. It utilizes the concept of like cures like to match a remedy to the symptoms that the person is presenting. Um, these symptoms are the guiding force throughout the whole process to show us exactly what the person is needing to come back into a state of balance. So, the big thing about homeopathy is the main law of similars, which is like cures like. So, um, I guess I'll go into who Hahnemann is and how he kind of stumbled upon this. So, Hahnemann was a German physician, and he was he is the founder of homeopathy, but this overall concept of like curing like has existed throughout history and come to us multiple times. So, you know, even back to the Mahabharata, one of these very ancient texts, we have the concept of, you know, the snake venom being the cure for the snake bite. So there's the Greek myth on Asclepius, which is where the caduceus rod comes in, not Mercury's caduceus, but Asclepius's, which is the two snakes going up the rod. So this is also symbolic of the snake, the cure being the snake, and also for the bite being the venom. So it's kind of sprinkled in throughout history. Hippocrates brought forward like cures like, and so he said that there's two forms of healing. One would be through treating through opposites, and one treating through similars. And then lastly, Paracelsus, who's a pretty well-known name, he came out and was saying it's the law of similars, not the opposites, that gets to the root cause of healing. And he started leaning more towards German folk medicine, which was using that concept. So, you know, a lot of the indigenous cultures and the ancients have known about this concept, but Hahnemann stumbled upon this. He was a trained medical doctor at this time. And so this is during the Industrial Revolution. It's a lot of change going on. He went through like multiple wars, like the 7 Years' War and the French Revolution. It was just a wild period of change. And the medicine at the time, you know, he was started to practice. He practiced for 9 years. He deemed it as cruel and actually was doing more harm than helping, which goes against the Hippocratic Oath, which he had taken. So he actually stopped practicing medicine, which put him and his family in a state of poverty. And he went back to researching and translating medical journals. And just trial and error and just going back to the books, because he's like, I can't ethically practice this form of medicine. So one day he stumbled upon this author's work about using cinchona bark to cure malaria. And he started thinking about it, and he was like, oh, well, that's interesting, because this particular substance, which is homeopaths we call China, causes those symptoms. So that's kind of funny that it would treat malaria. And so he dosed himself, which is where we get the very first proving, with cinchona bark, and his body started presenting the same symptoms as malaria. When he stopped taking it, the symptoms subsided. So he was like, okay, there's something to this, because when I take this substance, these symptoms are coming forward. But he wanted to continue to make it more gentle, to where there were not going to be any lingering side effects, because that's what he was actually trying to prevent, was these medicines causing more harm than good. So he continued to experiment with diluting the substances more and more, to the point where we get to, it's basically just the energy that's left of the substance. So the cool thing about homeopathy that varies from some of the other forms of medicine is that we can actually use substances that may be deemed toxic or even poisonous, because now we're just using their energy imprint is all that's left. So something like belladonna, which is considered a deadly nightshade, which we could never use in its strictly herbal form, can be diluted down, and now it becomes a medicine. So it's interesting if you think about, you know, like God doesn't make mistakes, and like every plant and mineral has some kind of gift to give us. So it opens us up to exploring things in a whole new way of like, okay, well, this in this substance is toxic, but when we bring it down to its natural essence, there are healing properties within that. And so that is how he came up with provings. And so he started documenting these, studying different substances, using his family and friends to experiment with provings about different medicines, and was able to make a lot of progress during his lifetime, and validate his research over time, and helped people all over the world, because there was a lot going on during this time as far as health. He definitely was very scientific in his approach, using the scientific method, having hypotheses, proving it over time, validating his research. And so a lot of times people want to discredit it as, oh, it's just the woo, you know, the woo woo, because there's nothing left to the substance. But, you know, it validates itself time and time again, and there's a lot of case studies that prove its benefits. And when it's used appropriately, um, through the philosophy that he presented to us, as far as matching the remedy to the person, then it is a very curative medicine. So if we want to cross compare it to something like naturopathy, well, we have a lot of similarities because these are holistic approaches to wellness. So we're looking at the mind, the body, the spirit, the emotional state of the person, and we're actually trying to get to the root cause with both of these forms of medicine. So there's a lot of naturopaths that are homeopaths, and they kind of cross and combine a lot of these things. But it's just that homeopaths specifically focus on the like cures like, and we are masters of prescribing our remedies to match certain symptoms. Where naturopathy is going to use many means to healing. They can be used in chiropractic care, acupuncture. They're going to work on nutrition, maybe some supplements. And all this is important because even with homeopathy, we have this concept called obstacles to cure. And so if the person is eating a really bad diet and they're living in a really toxic environment and they're in an abusive relationship, well, the remedies may not stick as long because they're in a position that is creating a state of unwellness. And so naturopathy comes in handy as far as saying, okay, well, your diet is, you can't just be eating McDonald's all day. So they're going to help work with that person to get to building up the overall lifestyle with them. Okay, so homeopathy can complement and work really well with naturopathy. So they kind of go together. They're kind of similar. It's just that homeopathy is more of a specific niche form of medicine that is specific to practicing this law of similars. And the way that we prescribe the remedies is very unique to us as homeopaths. But, my teacher has talked about many times, like, people can take remedies. They're going to a chiropractor, they're taking their remedies. That adjustment may stick a little bit longer. So we're building up the overall constitution, and then some of these other modalities are able to really settle, and they may need them less and less because their general constitution is just naturally stronger overall. So that's the big difference. And then we have, allopathy, which is the Western medicine model overall. And not all of their forms of medicine are allopathic. So with homeopathy means similar. And then pathy comes from pathos, which means suffering. So it's literally translated as similar suffering. Allopathy, which is what the Western model is mostly based off of, is opposite suffering. So if someone has inflammation, we're treating it with an anti-inflammatory. If they're having a histamine response, we're treating it with an antihistamine. So this is that concept of treating through opposites. It does work as far as it will suppress those symptoms down, but it's really hard to find an actual cure to those symptoms because what we're doing is we're suppressing and driving them deeper into the body. And later on, that might end up turning into something more chronic that we have to take care of. So with homeopathy, we are not working through suppression at all. We are trying to give the similar substance so that the body is supported to actually cure and relieve those symptoms. So through homeopathy, I was able to actually cure my seasonal allergies that I had every single year my entire life. I took allopathy, which was Zyrtec, every single year, and I needed it every single spring, every single fall. It wasn't a cure. It was suppressing the symptoms, which sometimes we just need a break, right? So I understand why people might want that model, but overall, as homeopaths, we're trying to support the body's overall vital energy to be able to bring itself back into a state of homeostasis, and hopefully to find a cure so that person doesn't have seasonal allergies anymore, because we've got to the root cause overall. So that's the big difference. And, with allopathy, there's a time and a place for it. We need life-saving surgeries. You break a bone, you want to go get an x-ray. And so it's all complementary to each other to a certain extent. And we respect the Western medicine and know when we're at that point where we need to send the people that we're working with to, a trained medical professional. So it's really just knowing knowing when that's not the route, and you have a cold and you just need a little support, maybe trying something natural first. That's kind of my approach to working with homeopathy. Is I try to take care of it on my own. If I can't, then I'll go to the doctor or the hospital or whatever. So
Right. Now, when you were talking about how you homeopathy, the doctor that you were talking about kept diluting and diluting and diluting until you had a small amount, that reminded me of flower essences.
oh yes. So
And it's
Batch was a homeopath originally. He actually created a group of remedies called the no-sodes, which are remedies made from things like viruses and bacteria
hmm,
that they dilute, and then they give it to the person. So if you think about like tuberculosis, they would give someone that could not get over it, they would give them the diluted um, homeopathic remedy tuberculosis, which would help the body finally clear out some of those lingering symptoms. So Batch created the no-sodes, but over time he was like, I'm kind of sick of exploring through this. It's like germs and bacteria. It's just he's like there has to be a different way, and so he started really working more with just nature and plants. And one day it just came to him that it's these flowers, like they're beautiful, they're
mhm.
gentle. And so he actually was a homeopath, and the flower essences are considered to be homeopathic remedies because they are the essence. So even in my homeopathic training, we had a whole course on flower essences,
Okay.
because they're really good at supporting with the remedies the emotional body, because a lot of these physical symptoms actually start with grief or
Hmm.
fear or anxiety. And so sometimes we can give these flower essences together with the remedies and really offer a lot of support to the patient as they're finding their way back to wholeness. So yeah,
Yeah,
Batch
beautiful.
was a homeopath.
And it reminded me also, I know I've studied herbology some, and just
Mhm.
a lot of it's my own experimenting and growing and using of what I produce. But I know there's two different schools of thought really with herbal um, herbology, and one is more of you design a product where you're using the same product for everyone because the plants have those things that help each one, right?
Mhm.
That are always good. But then the other side goes into like wet or dry or cold or hot, or and
Mhm.
you treat, I guess it's similars there that you would be treating. So if you're running a fever, you treat it with something hot,
Right.
right?
Right.
Mhm.
Or if you get a burn, you can put warm water, not cold water, on a
Mhm.
burn. Yeah. So there's, the herbalists are our original, healers. And so a lot of what we've learned through homeopathy, we have gratitude to the herbalists who have done this extended amount of research with the plants and documented their processes, because we have a lot of that goes into how we figured out what our remedies actually can cure based on what they produce when they are ingested.
Mhm.
So, that's one of the myths I was going to go into, because a lot of people don't understand that homeopathy is not herbalism, even though we do work with plants and herbs. But it goes beyond that, because an herbalist is going to give that mother tincture. So if we have
Mhm.
lemon balm in the mother tincture, it's potent. There's a lot of plant
Right.
material that goes into that
Yeah.
tincture. And I've worked with an herbalist for years. I'm very grateful to her. And there is a time and a place. Sometimes you just want to sip some herbal tea and you don't even need a remedy, because you just needed to relax and settle in. But with homeopathy, the big difference is that we're going to dilute that mother tincture down to where the original lemon balm is no, it's just the energy that of lemon balm that is left. um, so that's the overall difference, even though we do work with plants, but we can also work with animal substances. Like I said, with the no-sodes, there's like viruses. We can work with poisons, all sorts of minerals.
Hmm.
So it's just there's a lot more options as far as the substances that we use to make our remedies. um, and we focus on a single remedy with homeopathy, where an herbal tincture You know, my allergy tincture that I had made, I think it had like 5 or 6 different herbs in it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big difference too, is with homeopathy, we are looking for the one single remedy that covers pretty much
Huh.
every single symptom that the body's presenting. So if you have a cold and you have mucus and you have chills and you're, you know, got a fever that's on and off, it starts exactly at 4 a.m. every morning. You have lingering despair that's not really normal for you. All of that's going to go into account when we're matching the remedy. So we're not going to give you a remedy for your snot, a remedy for your earache, a remedy for your headache. We're going to find a remedy that covers, you know, the picture that you're presenting, and it should just be a single remedy. Over the course of an acute illness, that single remedy may shift, because as you start to heal, you know, the overall picture may shift to where it's like, well, now I don't have as much mucus, so that's not really a big thing anymore, but my throat's itchy and I still have a lingering cough. So the remedy may shift, but overall, we're trying to find a single remedy that fits the overall picture. So that's different than some other forms of medicines as well.
Yeah, interesting. So what inspired you to become a practicing homeopath, and um, how has it transformed your own life or your healing journey?
So I started working with homeopathy about 6 years ago when I was pregnant with my daughter. I was in a couple holistic groups and people had just thrown the idea out, and so I bought a homeopathic birth kit. So it had, you know, 18 remedies in it that were pretty specific to birth. So it is individualized medicine, but a lot of times with pregnancy, you know, mastitis is pretty much going to feel like mastitis. So there might be 3 or 4 remedies that might match that overall picture. So that's how they're able to make those little kits. But every now and then the kit won't have what you need and you have to just buy an individual remedy. But I worked with it. I had sciatica that was just awful. I would just be standing there and then, you know, baby would move and then I would be on the floor and I was just screaming in pain. Luckily,
Oh,
I had went over the remedies with my husband. It came with a little Materia Medica that went over the basic descriptions of each thing. And he was like, okay, you know, this is the one for sciatica. And he gave it to me. And within about 45 seconds, I was able to stand up and walk to the car. I ended up going, you know, into labor soon. So it's really important that I was able to walk into the hospital. And without the remedy, I wouldn't have made it that far. Um, so it helped me with the sciatica. It helped me with the birth process, with the pain and the anxiety of just giving birth. I had a lot of fear with my second birth because there was this anxiety of, if I die, then my first child will be an orphan. And so I don't know, when I gave birth to my son, I was not scared in the same way, but there was something about this one that gave me a lot more anticipation, anxiety. So once I gave birth, I used it to treat mastitis, which I got. It was awful. And I matched a remedy, and I was able to do most of this prescribing completely on my own based on the little booklet that came with it. But later on, I ended up getting pretty severe postpartum depression because I just had such bad insomnia. I wasn't sleeping. I mean, I went multiple weeks where I was sleeping like 5 minutes at a time.
mm,
I was waking up screaming because, like, as soon as my body would go into sleep, it would just shock me back awake. And at
mm.
this point, I was like, okay, I need a professional homeopath to help me with this, because now it's gotten to where I don't know how to match this kind of remedy. So I was able to find a local woman, and she was just an angel to me. She took my case, and I was almost instantly able to sleep. I dosed the remedy a few times over the course of a month, and by the end of the month, I was not only sleeping, but I wasn't struggling with depression and anxiety anymore. And eventually, I just didn't need her for a few years. Then later, you know, I was having some symptoms, some like autoimmune stuff. I was having chronic fatigue. I was getting very sick a lot. I ran into this series of eye infections that it was like they would go away, and I used the antibiotics, you know. I was like, I'm just going to take the antibiotics. I want this eye infection to be gone, and then it would work, and then it would come right back, and then they would give me stronger antibiotics, and then they were giving me steroids and everything. And this series of events led me to having chronic dry eye, which they told me I would have for the rest of my life, and I would have to use these eye drops for the rest of my life. And I couldn't drive, I couldn't make art, I could, and I felt like everyone's like, you're really overreacting. And I'm like, I can't see. My eyes cannot open. They were so dry from the overuse of these antibiotic drops. And then I also was getting reinfected. And so I just was like, why is this happening to me? And I just sat down and I was like, you know what? I'm going to go back to the homeopathy. I'm going to find a homeopath and I'm going to try to see if they can help this, because homeopathy is a really great, like, last resort when nothing else is working. There, it's worth a shot, right? So I found another homeopath and she was just as great as the first one. She was able to not only completely treat the infection, I never got an eye infection again, but she was able to, within a month's time, completely turn the dry eye around, and I no longer have it. I don't need eye drops. And I don't have eye infections anymore. And then, these other things started taking care of themselves. Like with the autoimmune, I was having this rheumatoid arthritis, pain in my joints, and just always tired and all. And so these other symptoms started to lift around the same time I started taking the remedy. And eventually, over time, my remedy kind of changed because my picture changed. But these conditions that are deemed chronic, autoimmune, they say is like, you can't heal autoimmune, So as that started to go away, I was like, oh, well, that's amazing. That's amazing that we even have something that can lift those symptoms that they have told me for years are basically incurable. Just take the anti-inflammatories, right? Just, take the antibiotics when you get sick all the time. And so as those started to lift, I was like, if this can help treat the things that these doctors have labeled incurable, then I want to explore it. I want to bring this forward to my community, and I want to offer people hope, because, I know so many people, they have neurological conditions, they have fibromyalgia, it's just these unexplainable things, and they're being gaslit, because the doctors are like, we don't know what's wrong with you. Well, homeopathy, we don't need a diagnosis. We just need you to tell us how you feel. We just need your symptoms so that we can compile those and match them with a remedy and really hopefully bring the patient back to a full state of wellness. Some things are incurable, genetic things like trisomy, we can help support the person with their flare-ups that they're known to have, but we can't reverse a genetic disease. If someone has their pancreas taken out, we can't, heal them from being a diabetic, but we can support them on their diabetic journey. So there are some limitations with homeopathy, like all forms of medicine. But it does offer hope, specifically in those areas where the patient just doesn't have any other options and they're just being hung out to dry because the doctors just don't understand, and they don't have any treatments yet for those diseases. So that is where it shines the most. And that is what inspired me the most to continue to learn this, because I'm like, everybody needs to at least know that this is an option. And then, treating people at the acute level, these little colds, the hay fevers, the flus, if we can treat those in a really gentle way without suppressing and driving these diseases deeper into the tissues, then we prevent a lot of those chronic states from even happening. So it becomes really important the way that we handle these minute things that we're experiencing bring us into that state of health, because these symptoms are important to the body. Symptoms are how the body keeps us alive. So if you're coughing, we don't want to suppress the cough. We want to support the body to expel what the cough is trying to release. And so it's just a different way of looking at it. And then if we suppress the cough, well, now that cough might turn into bronchitis. It might turn into pneumonia, because we've driven it deeper and deeper. So yeah, that's overall my story about what inspired me to want to learn it myself and explore it more, because it just fascinated me. And to this day, I'm still, like, I hear stories, I'm just crying, just fascinated. These infertility stories and these things where people were just like, sorry, you're going to have this mental illness the rest of your life. And then now they don't have this mental illness anymore after working with a homeopath for 6 months. It's just like, it's amazing. It's so inspiring to hear the healing journeys. So.
Yeah. Awesome. So, I'm sure there's, with the people not knowing exactly what it is and such a different model from modern medicine, what are some of the, like, the major myths or misconceptions about homeopathy that you feel strongest about that you'd like to tell us of?
Okay, so I'm going to go into two, and one I'm going to read from a book because she does a great job at giving recommendations for case studies. But the first one that I want to cover is that homeopathic remedies are placebos. So people think that because they're just basically energy medicine, that there's no way that they could work, and that they are basically just a sugar pill, and that the person just thinks that they're getting better, and it's all in their mind. As much as placebos are cool, it's just not what's going on with homeopathy. And the biggest thing that we have to prove that is that homeopathy works on babies, animals, and even plants. So, you know, an animal doesn't know that you're giving it a remedy. And so when the animal starts to get better, that already disproves the fact that it may be a placebo. And the same thing with plants, you know, they have a whole branch of homeopathy dedicated to agriculture, which is really amazing because it helps to limit things like pesticides, and instead uses remedies, which are non-toxic. And so, you know, going down that rabbit hole like was absolutely beautiful. And I cry every time like I see something like this. But yeah, they use it with agriculture, you know, with cows and, you know, these farm animals and things like that. That the cow doesn't know that you're giving it a remedy. It can't be a placebo. A baby doesn't know that you've given it a remedy. So when its ear infection goes away, it's just not a placebo. It's just like, by definition, that's not what a placebo is. So that's the main thing that we work against and that we see over and over again. And the next big misconception is that homeopathy is mysterious and unscientific. So I'm going to read from this amazing book, which I highly recommend, from Miranda Castro. She's just absolutely incredible, and I'm using this. I resort to this book all the time. I have a YouTube video talking about it. The big books if you want to learn, and this is on it. So I'm just going to read this particular section on homeopathy is mysterious and unscientific myth. So the fact that homeopathic medicines are prepared in a pharmacy or a laboratory, and that their preparation involves a particular technique subject to precise and clearly stated controls. It does not involve mysterious and secret processes, which put it into the realm of white magic or alchemy, is enough to convince many people of its validity. Homeopaths have traditionally justified their practice by their results, without feeling a need to explain how their methods work. The homeopathic philosophy or doctrines is a set of rules for practice, one that hasn't changed since it was formulated 180 years ago, now over 200 years ago, because this book was written in the 90s. These rules and principles constitute a unified hypothesis whose validity is tested out empirically, with cured patients confirming the hypothesis. Harris Coulter, in his book Homeopathic Science and Modern Medicine, The Physics of Healing with Microdoses, discusses this issue at great length and describes many of the trials that have been conducted over the past 50 years or so using plants, animals, and humans as controls to prove the effectiveness of homeopathic medicines. So there is such a specific scientific technique to why homeopathy works, why we select certain remedies. And so it is, I understand that it seems kind of silly that energy medicine would have any kind of effect that would be long lasting, because it just goes against what we've been taught. You know, you have to break out of that way of thinking in order to be open to seeing it from this perspective. But if you give yourself the space to actually do a little bit of research, that's not biased against homeopathy to begin with. I mean, if the scientist is out to prove it, that it doesn't work, then he's going to be able to convince you with his random ideas that it doesn't work. But if you read an unbiased opinion on it and you actually look at the case studies, you know, it's absolutely phenomenal. I mean, the way that it has been able to treat epidemics is so good that they accuse the homeopaths of faking the data, because they were able to basically reverse some of these epidemics in Haiti. Okay. And like, there's like the people I've met, like that would come into my classes to teach certain subjects on it. I remember just being like, this is the most this is the smartest person I've ever met, you know. Like, they were doctors, then they became homeopaths. They're very well versed in anatomy and pathology. They know all about epidemic diseases, and they go out there and put themselves in war zones to save people's lives. And then they do so well, but yet they're still discredited because, of course, they're making it up. Of course, the epidemic that they were able to reverse and put back into a more dormant state is, you know, it's just a placebo, right? So it's like, it's just so hard when you spend this time and you just see these beautiful people that have these great ethics, high integrity, you know, insanely intelligent, and then it's just discredited by someone, you know, that's just like a keyboard warrior as you know, these people are just selling snake oil, you know. And it's something that many of us homeopaths are working really hard to help educate people on, and to just present it without this magic. You know, a lot of people, I've seen a lot of even Christians that come out against it because it works so well that they're like, well, it must be magic, and so it must be evil, it must be the occult. And it's just like, it's a scientific approach to, you know, we see what the body needs, we present the remedy, we bring the body back into homeostasis. It's a very grounded philosophy. And so that's the biggest myths and misconceptions that I'm seeing over and over again about it, that I would like to clarify for some people. So
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
yeah, thanks for asking.
I have something going on in my head here that I want to ask you before that I'm kind of just going to say. You can respond to it if you want to, and then we can go on to other things. But it's when you were talking about, say, like if your pancreas was removed and you couldn't do liver. Well, actually, because you talked to us last time you were a guest about the different layers of the human aura, right? And I work in the biofield. Every organ that we have in our body has a place in the biofield. And even when that organ is removed from your body, you have it in your biofield. One of the things I work with a lot now is the placenta and tuning the placental energy because it's there. And there's so much trauma in it, because births aren't usually done the way were originally designed to be done. And so it leaves people with trauma. And so what I'm thinking about is what if you, like I've done basic flower essences, you know, I take a little jar of water out and put the flower in it that's still attached to the plant, right? And set it there for, you know, hours or whatever until I touch it and the water, you know, the energy tells me good, it's done, right?
Right.
And why can't you find the organ in the biofield and have your jar of water or whatever base you want to use and hold the intention that energy, then holding it in that energy in the biofield would transfer into your jar and use that for a remedy.
I mean, that sounds like an awesome concept.
Yeah.
You know?
And I might add, if you could find that feeling that you felt when you got sick, or when you're going to the root cause, it's really important to associate the feeling and bring that up, and then change the story. You know, if you were always saying, I'm not good enough, well, you found the feeling in your body, and then you could say, I am good enough. I always will be. I exist and I matter. And that vibration comes up with the flower essences, with the biofield. I mean, we're raising up from that low level, and we're becoming who we really are. So, yeah, good work. Yeah.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. So, could you walk us through, like, if I wanted to come to you for something, say, like, this, you had experience with this, even allergies. I've had sinus allergies since I was in third grade, right? I remember exactly when it happened, and it was first just anyway, I don't need to go into my story. But so if I came to you, what would be your process of accepting a new client, and how would you address things?
Okay, so I have a section on my website that's specific to booking homeopathy, acutes, or surgical support. So those are the two things that I'm able to take at this point in my training. So when you fill out the form, it's going to ask you, what is it that is going on with you? And I'll be able to very quickly figure out, is this a chronic condition, or is this an acute condition? So with your story, you've had allergies since third grade. That's actually going to be considered chronic because it's
Sure.
a long-lasting issue. Acutes are usually something within 2 weeks, maybe a month's time. So if you didn't normally have allergies, you just went on a hayride and now your nose is running and you have hay fever, and it's not common for you to get hay fever every single year at that time, those I would be able to take that case. But if someone comes to me with something chronic, what I do is I outsource it and I send them links to other homeopaths that can take chronic or constitutional cases. That's going to go all the way back to when you were in third grade and ask you all those questions about your life and your family and the emotions at the time. So that's going to be more chronic, and they're trained for a lot longer in order to take those cases. So for an acute, if I deem that what you're coming to me for, let's say hay fever, or something like that, is an acute, then I will take you on. We will talk about all your symptoms. I need to get a pretty clear etiology, which is, if you can think back to what caused it. Was it, oh, I was out in the rain, I got really cold, and then my symptoms just kind of came out of nowhere? That's going to be an etiology. Or I got really mad at my husband and then I started coughing, So all of those details are really important. We want to know concomitants, accompanying symptoms. So yeah, your throat's hurting, but if you're swallowing and that pain's extending to the ear, and then you have pressure behind your eyes and things like that, those are going to be concomitants, accompanying symptoms to your main thing. The bodily affinity is important. So like the throat, or my stomach hurts, or my I pulled a nerve or something like that. We need to, if we can know the particular part of the body that's overall hurting, that's important. And any peculiar symptoms. So things that just don't really make sense but came about the same time is like, well, I got this cold, but then, I just have this urge to like scratch, like a tickly feeling in my throat at the same time, or something just changed in your overall, temperament. That's just not really like you. You're really normally like a very friendly, kind person, but you're just so grumpy today. You're agitated. And most of the time, sickness is going to bring that out anyways. But some people are normally, they handle sickness well, but this one, they're just really not. Those little fine details, those peculiar things about you that have shifted since you got these symptoms, they are also important. And also, if there's some kind of pain that we're talking about, I'm going to ask you to describe what that pain feels like for you. Is it excruciating? Is it light? Is it stabbing? Is it throbbing? Is it shooting? There's all different types of pain, and a lot of us aren't thinking that way because when we were kids, we just took anti-inflammatory for all of those pains. But if we can get very specific with how that pain feels, like the pain shoots from my lower back down my right thigh, that is going to be great information for me, because it's going to help me really narrow down the remedies and the sides of the body, because there's some remedies that have an affinity for the right side of the body or the left side. So those little details all come in handy as we're taking a case. But the big thing is I'm just going to listen to you. I'm going to take little notes, and then once we're done, I'm going to repertorize, which I can go into what a repertory is. Repertorize, which is use this book here, which has all the symptoms in it and the remedies that match those symptoms. So I'm going to go into each one. I'm going to look at all the remedies that match all those symptoms, and then I'm going to use the materia medica to help narrow it down. So I can usually get it down to 1 to 3 remedies. And then at that point, that's when just maybe my intuition, or, you know, I feel more called to explore one. But sometimes I'll say, you know, let's start here. But if you have no improvement, then keep this remedy on standby, and we may switch to it. Because sometimes the remedies are so close. But once I give one, maybe your symptoms change just enough to be like, okay, let's take this other one now. It's the clear match. So we're really just taking the whole story, the whole case, and then we are repertorizing it down to finding the very specific remedies that match those symptoms. And then the way that I might have you dose might look different depending on the severity of the symptoms, how long they are. Like something like surgery, I'm going to have you dose more often right after surgery than I might, like, you have a cold, I might just have you dose 3 times that day, and pause and wait and see. So the way that the remedies are suggested might be different, varying, pending what's going on. Sometimes I have people put the remedy in water, and that might be 6 ounces, that might be 14 ounces. It just depends on what's going on with them. But when we add it to water, it makes it a little bit more dynamic. If the remedy is working, it seems to slow down, we might add it to a little bit more water, or we might go up in potency, which actually up for us is more diluted. So a 30C is less diluted than a 200C. So when we go up, we're really going down in dilutions, or up in dilutions and down in the material substance. So, you know, it just depends. It's very individualized medicine. And so this is, you know, I think what a lot of people run into where they're like, oh, the homeopathy doesn't work, is that they're reading something and it gives you 3 remedies for colds. And you took one of them and it didn't work. And you say, oh, homeopathy doesn't work. Well, did you look at what makes it? Oh, I didn't talk about the modalities. Another big thing is the modalities for sickness. What makes it better or worse? Does hot help it? Like if you put a heating pad on your cramps, does it make the cramps go away? Or is actually taking a cold shower what's easing it? Because that is really going to help in the long run too. So, you know, all of that comes together within a consult, and I do all that detailed work, and I send you a little protocol for you to do. And then for an acute, I would be on call or standby for 7 days. As you're working through the remedy, I want to know, has it gotten worse? Has it gotten better? Do you have different symptoms now? Has it shifted? And then I'll just be there to support you along the way. So, you know, sometimes I may suggest adding a flower essence in with it, or a cell salt, or bone broth, or something, you know, maybe an herbal tea, because sometimes we just need those nutritional support. Or sometimes we just need something to help us relax, because there is sometimes patience required. You know, if you haven't even made it to your 3rd dose yet and the day hasn't ended, well, don't give up on homeopathy. Sometimes you just need to give it a little bit of time. I just had my own acute, and I was like, the universe just really wanted to give me that empathy of having a personal, fresh experience of a cold. And, you know, homeopathy was a great support for my cold, but it still lasted 7 days. It wasn't fun, but because of the homeopathy, I was able to not use ibuprofen. I didn't feel called to do the Dayquil. It helped me recover at a quicker speed. It didn't just zap away my symptoms. Now, sometimes a remedy, if you get to it really quickly at the first onset, you know, maybe it can help balance it out to where you don't get the full cold. But my body needed that cold. You know, my body needed the cough. It needed, you know, the sneezing. My body wanted to get something out. It wanted to detox, and the remedies helped support me through that, to where I did not reach for that bottle of ibuprofen. I did not reach for the antihistamine. And then I was able to come into full recovery. Now, stronger, you know, less susceptible to that illness. And I didn't drive anything deeper into my body. And so, you know, I don't have to worry about that coming up later as something else. So it's just, it was a really great support. But, you know, sometimes people take a single remedy and they're like, oh, it just doesn't work. And it's like, well, it takes, for something like a cold that has a slower onset, it might have a slower healing response. something that's really fast, like a fever that comes on out of nowhere, sometimes the remedy will also be fast acting and help soothe the fever. But we need the fever a lot of times, so the fever is helping eliminate the invader. And so, we just want to make sure that the person is supported and comfortable through some of these symptoms. We're not necessarily trying to villainize the symptoms and turn them off completely. We're trying to support the person as they have this healing experience that the body is asking them for. But homeopathy is really great when we have a sickness that's just ongoing. It's not stopping. We can see that the vital force is trying really hard, but there's just a little bit of something's deranged in there, and the remedies are going to help support the vital force and get it functioning, similar to something like Reiki. It just gets stuck in a loop sometimes. It just needs a little push to help it clear out an illness that may be lingering, days after you're still sneezing or something like that. So it's really great for that. But that's basically what a case looks like for me. If I outsource you to someone that's going to take more constitutional or chronic, those sessions can go sometimes 2 hours. It feels a lot like therapy. Every time I've had one, I'm crying. I'm like, well, I was a really sad child. And they are like really. They go a lot deeper into the emotional body, your family's background, all the way down. Like I discovered that, my original issue started in the womb because I was an unwanted child, which I think we talked about when you came on the show, having a similar experience. And so it's like the main issue started really close to my birth. And so it's just a different experience than the way that I would take an acute, which is going to be a quicker consult, and then I'll work with you for the 7 days. With surgical support, I charge a little more for those because I actually create a customized remedy set for you that's going to help support you for the before surgery if you have any kind of anxiety, and then the after surgical care, just to get you through that hump. Because a lot of people don't want to take, the morphine for as long, or they take the anesthesia and then they just feel loopy for days, or they're constipated from the opioids, or so the surgical kit is there so you have all the remedies on hand that are very common to that particular procedure. So it's a very personalized thing that I make for people. And then I'm on call for 10 days to help you if you need help matching one of those remedies to a specific ailment.
Well, nice. You had talked about like when you give the remedy to a person that sometimes you might have them diluted in, or to add it to a cup of water or add it to, depending on. So what is the basis, or what is it water that you start with the energy that you're working with, or is it in glycerol or alcohol, vodka, like a lot of tinctures are? What's
This would
often a
just be
base?
spring water.
Okay.
So it also saves the remedies because one single pellet. So I can tell you to take a dry dose. With my kids, if my son's playing football and he gets hurt, and I'm going to give him a dry dose of arnica for blunt force trauma.
Mhm.
When we get home, I'm going to make him a little remedy bottle, and I'm going to put one of those pellets in the remedy bottle, and now that water holds that resonance, and so he doesn't need to keep taking the pellets because now the water holds the resonance. But when we put it in water, it's important to succuss it. So you either hit it on your hand 10 times, or you stir it, and that's going to reactivate it. Those little things are what make people think, oh, well, that's a little woo woo, but it just helps reactivate it each time, and it's a really important part if you're going to be dosing with water. And then so each time he needs a dose, I'm going to stir it, and he's going to take a sip or a tablespoon, and that's a dose. And then that is going to sit there, and when he's ready for his next dose in a few hours, I'm going to stir it, and I'm going to give him a dose. And so that prolongs our remedy stock. And like I said, sometimes it can make it more dynamic. So we can dilute it more and more, and it becomes a little bit, kind of more customized to what's going on with that particular person. But I personally, when I'm dosing myself, almost always put it in about 6 ounces of water and do the succussion method. It works great for me. And it's just nice to have the remedy just right there, kind of pre-made for when you need your next dose. So.
Yeah. So, what things are really common that people would come to you for? You've mentioned maybe a few, but maybe you could go more into detail or add
So,
a few more.
so for acutes, the definition of an acute would be a self-limiting issue. It has very distinct symptoms. It's a short course with a peak followed by recovery and or death. If we don't take care of our acutes, sometimes they result in bad endings, which is why we want to take care of them or go to the hospital, right, if we're to that point. But acute conditions would be things like wounds, surgery, bites and stings, dental support through dental procedures, upper respiratory things, headaches that aren't reoccurring for a long period of time. So migraines a lot of times will fall chronic just because a lot of times they're consistently having migraines. But if you never have migraines and you just happen to have one, then that's going to fall into an acute. Pregnancy and birth falls into acute. Infectious disease. So some of the viruses, the bacterial stuff. Drug side effects. So you took a pharmaceutical and now you're having all sorts of weird symptoms. That falls into an acute. Rashes, colds, sprains, strains, flus. Those are kind of just your basic examples of acute. But basically things that you have a clear etiology for. You know what happened. I fell. My arm is bruised. It's swelling, and I have shooting pain. That's going to be an acute that I can help you match a remedy for. So.
Was had you heard of how effective different homeopathy remedies were during COVID? Or was that too
They did
big of a
use.
subject on COVID?
So with COVID, because it was such a worldwide epidemic, the remedies ended up being a little bit more specific to localized areas. So COVID really was different, and it was almost like the different areas of the world were presenting different symptoms. It became harder for it. But some of the homeopaths, they got together all around the world and they came together to take all the symptoms. Okay, so when we are treating an epidemic, we treat the whole group, whether it's a country or a community or the world, we treat them as one patient. So they take all of the symptoms. The thing about COVID is that it kept shifting, so the remedies changed multiple times as COVID evolved. But yeah, mostly with epidemics, they're going to take the bulk of the symptoms that that everyone's presenting with, and they're going to find a single remedy for the entire epidemic, and they're going to share that with people so that they have either on hand, or in this case, we can use homeopathy as a prophylactic. If we know someone has been around someone, that has something like tuberculosis, which I know isn't as common these days, but if they've been directly exposed to someone that has an infectious disease, then they can take the remedy that is helping the person with infectious disease. The people around them can go ahead and take it like a prophylactic, and it will sometimes work from them even getting symptoms. I did use this concept is prophylactic myself when my son had a stomach virus, and he was just like, usually as a family we all throw up together, and it is the worst to be vomiting and then catching vomit at the same time. And with this time, my son had it a couple days before. I had matched a remedy China, surprisingly, which is what we talked about that Hahnemann had originally used. China is a really great remedy when we've lost a lot of bodily fluids. Okay, so he got to the point and it was like, okay, I know exactly what this remedy is. I gave him the China, and he was finally able to have longer increments between his vomiting. Okay, but I kind of started feeling a little like, not so great. My homeopath was like, go ahead and take the China. So I took it. I did not catch that stomach virus. I'm talking, I was like, I had, been cleaning it. I had been holding him. Usually I would have caught it, but I took the China and I took a couple doses because I would start to feel a little bit nauseous, and then I would take another dose of the China, and I did not catch that stomach bug. And I am very grateful for it because it is so hard to be a caretaker when you're sick. Mm-hmm. So I have seen the effects firsthand of using it in that method. So
I'm reading here in the comments. Moni says that her husband's a chiropractor, and all of the families who dealt with COVID that they know, the ones that were treated with homeopathic remedies did the best.
Hmm.
And also the people with long COVID did great
Yeah,
with the
it
homeopathy.
it has great results for working with epidemics.
Hmm.
So when we had that class on, and I was myself blown away. I would love to even explore that more myself. But yeah, with epidemics, it takes a lot of homeopaths coming together and working together to try to solve the mystery to find the main remedy. And there may be, like for COVID, there ended up being, maybe 5 to 10 because it was changing. So all the
Hmm.
homeopaths kind of kept those remedies in mind. And if this person was kind of peculiar, they're going to go towards that one versus this one because this one has a cough and this one was throwing up and now this one's on a respirator. It was the weirdest. It wasn't a typical virus, so we had to
Hmm.
be on our toes to solve that one together. So,
Yeah, yeah. So, of any of the remedies or approaches that you think are real common or that everyone should know about for everyday situations, is there one or two that you could um,
I gotta
think?
go.
Oh,
okay.
okay.
I gotta
Thank
go.
you, Ramey. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Bye.
Bye.
Nice to meet you again.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll just go over a couple that I keep in my purse
Mm-hmm.
at all times, just for those urgent first aids. Would be arnica. Everyone calls this the gateway remedy because it works so well. So the big standout thing for arnica is blunt force trauma. You've hit yourself really hard, you're bruising, it's swelling, or you've sprained your ankle or something like that. And usually, taking that dose of arnica immediately and then going home and taking a few more doses is going to be enough to knock out the pain, to make the bruising clear up a little bit quicker, and just overall help you heal more rapidly. I like to keep calendula on hand,
Mm-hmm.
specifically the gel. I kind of use it similar to Neosporin to clean a wound and to help it heal um, just quicker. It has just been amazing to have that on hand. Apis is a really big one because it's made from a bee, and it treats stings and things that come on suddenly or that are swelling. If you think about when you get stung by a bee, it's inflamed, it's hot, um, and it can sometimes just knock out the stinging pains that come from insect bites. So, and then the last one that I always keep on hand is aconite, because it is really great to neutralize shock, and a lot of illnesses actually start from fright or being shocked or scared. And so aconite things come on really fast. It has a sudden onset, and sometimes if you can give aconite within like the first 12 hours of a cough or something like that, it can just reverse the symptoms. So I just keep that on hand at all times because you just never know. You might be driving your car and witness a god awful wreck, and it's just take the aconite so that you're not storing that trauma from what you just saw into the
Mm-hmm.
body. It just helps you process things a little bit more rapidly. So those are the first aid remedies that I keep in my purse at all times
Yeah.
that I would probably recommend to anybody.
Nice. Yeah. And well, the aconite's just a little tiny flower, isn't it? On the
Uh-huh.
hillside in early spring, like February or something, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So
Around
it's going to be one of
in my
those
part of the
ones. Yeah.
country. Yeah. Oh, very
Yeah.
cool. Very cool. So, for a closing or parting comment, what would you want everyone to know about using the potential of homeopathy to transform their well-being and improve their lives?
So I guess to end, I would just say that, with homeopathy, it's not just about treating the symptoms, it's about bringing us back into a state of wholeness. Um, Homeopathy offers support and restores hope to people, specifically who have been discarded by the medical community as just, we don't know, it's all in your head. You're just going to have to deal with it. It offers hope to so many people who have just no answers to what's going on. So I just want people to, if they're in that place, to know that there is hope and that they can reach out and find supports. There's many different healing modalities out there. I know your show explores so many. Um, so I do think, we see like Einstein, the future of medicine will be the medicine of frequencies. There's something to it. Um, And it's not just magic. It's like there's a science to it. We're slowly coming up with the words to describe why some of these medicines work. But you know, if you have no hope, don't give up. Try some of these other alternative healing approaches, and you may be surprised what ends up helping. So,
Awesome. Awesome. And if you could tell people again how to get hold of you, Astral.
okay, so you can contact me if you want to book any kind of acute care on my website, astralmeadow.com. It's also a landing ground for my podcast and things like that. I do have a YouTube where I share things like book recommendations for homeopathy, or I just made a video on the different creams and gels that we use with homeopathy. So if you get on the YouTube, you can see some of that kind of content. It's Astral Meadow 369. My Instagram is at Astral Meadows, and I will also share this website. If you know that what you're dealing with is chronic or constitutional, you can go to homeopathycenter.org and click the find a homeopath section, and that's going to give you a list of all of the homeopaths that have availability that you can find and work with. And there's also a YouTube channel if you want to learn more called All Things Homeopathy, and he is awesome. He does a great job of breaking it down and explaining each thing in a nice little 10 to 20 minute video. So if you want to learn a little bit more, that's a great resource. So
Yeah, thank you. That sounds interesting. Very good. So, Astral, thank you for joining us today. It's been a lovely discussion and great to learn and to hear about homeopathy more.
Yeah,
So,
thank you so much for having me back on. I love your
you're welcome.
work, and it's always nice to just be in your energy for a little bit. So I
Oh,
appreciate you.
well, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone who's watched today and who'll be watching now, whenever it is you're watching. And we appreciate you too. And
Thank
bye-bye.
you. Bye.